Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of season 5 of the Runners Roundtable, where this season a little more informal than previous seasons, where conversations happen about hot topics in the running space, where we are sharing our own hot takes on these topics. And today I am joined by Jen Steele. If you all have been listening to the podcast, you know who she is. She helps me break down my races. She's also a running coach that I respect tremendously. And anytime I get to talk to you, Jen, I feel like it's like a Sunday day, right? Not Sunday like the day, but like an ice cream where it's like, here's my special treat with the hot fudge and the whipped cream and the cherry. It's all of that. And today we're going to be talking about zone 2 training. But before we get into that, Jen, just in case people have not heard your voice before, can you reintroduce yourself to all of us? Tell us who you are, what you do, and what are you celebrating in running right now for yourself?
Thank you so much. That might be the best comparison I've ever had to an ice cream sundae, especially right now. I will take it. I am Jen Steele. I am a certified run coach. I've been doing this for about 5.5 years now. I am in San Diego County, a little bit north of San Diego, and I have 2 young kids, and they were kind of I became like a real runner, I would say, jokingly, after I became a mom. And so that has been like my full entrance into pushing myself and challenging and becoming a run coach. And all of that was post kids for me. Something I am celebrating in running right now. I ran a marathon in June after a really bad marathon DNF in April. And I'm just super content right now with where my running is. And so I'm celebrating that because I was very not content for a while. And so it feels really good to just sit and be happy with nothing, with not pushing for anything, because I pushed for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, if you all don't follow her on Instagram, Misadventures of a Marathoner, you'll know that Jen, you did a marathon, then you did a 50K in Catalina Island, then you had that other marathon that was that the DNF, the one,
Yep.
it was a
Yep.
Revel race, right?
It was. Yep.
Okay, and then you went and you did Rock and Roll San Diego and absolutely crushed it. So, yeah, you've been doing a lot of running. And now I'm going to ask you just to kind of get the conversation started. How much of that running was zone 2 running, Jen?
I mean, very little of it. But most of it was easy running. It just wasn't zone 2 running, which is kind of how this conversation started for you and I, is that I posted something about how a carousel about how the internet has made running really hard for no good reason. And I think that it came from me seeing all these people posting about how we needed to do zone 2 running, and then my athletes asking me about their heart rate when they're running, and getting worried, right? And this is all happening as we're getting into summer, which we can talk about the science behind why that matters. And then I shared a quote from Steve Magnus, who is a athletic performance genius. He's written a number of books on peak performance in the space, and I really admire him. And I reshared something, and I think I had 8 people respond, and a bunch of people reshare what I had shared. And I was like, oh, this needs to live somewhere for me, because I feel very strongly about this, and it's obviously resonating with so many people.
Yeah, I find that the zone 2 conversation in general, I find it fascinating just because I've been running for over a decade. And when I first started running, no one ever talked about zone 2. And I read somewhere recently that I love, they're like, zone 2 is just rebranded easy running. And that's where people are kind of getting caught up in like, oh, zone 2 and my heart rate and all this stuff. And I know I struggle with it personally and professionally because personally, I'm feeling great on my run. And then my watch is telling me that I'm doing awful. Like I mean, at this point, my watch says I'm unproductive. I've been strange for the past week. And yet on my runs, I'm smiling. I'm laughing. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling like I can continue going. But because of the heart rate that my watch is reading, which, we can just come out and say it, your watch is very inaccurate for any of that. It's not, it doesn't even capture the full picture of what a run is. So when people get caught up in that, I'm always like, people just chill. Like I try to focus on other things, but I do have athletes similarly. So personally, I struggle with it because I'm like, watch, I just need you. If I could figure out how to turn off that function, I think I would be a happier runner. But also professionally, I see it in the athletes that I coach because they're like, oh, my heart rate. I see that I should be trying to lower my heart rate. And I'm like, don't worry about that. Like, don't, in all the things that you can worry about, that's not what I want you worrying about, because I don't want a person to spend their entire run looking at their watch or like pausing or doubting themselves because their watch is telling them something different. So I see that and I feel that on those two levels. But I want to take it back for a minute. And can you, from your understanding, just educate us a minute on what exactly is zone 2 when it comes to running?
Well, I like what you said, that it's easy running rebranded, except I would add on that it's easy running rebranded by a bunch of people who probably are not experienced, like certified run coaches who have been doing this thing for a while, right? You're supposed to keep your heart rate under 150 is like generally what it is. It is based on a scale of 1, I think, through 5, and there are heart rate bands, and you can go look up what they are, and you can plug in your max heart rate and figure out what they should be for you. But in general, it's under 150 for most people. If you use a Garmin, it's keeping it in the green range of heart rate. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell, but it often doesn't work for most people.
Yeah, I know I struggle with it big time. And I've read people that are like, oh, zone 2 is hard because you have to check your ego when you start to see the numbers. And I'm like, okay, yes, I get that when you are connected to the numbers and whatnot. But at the same time, for me, I feel like we're so disconnected from our bodies to begin with that once we start relying on our watch, we just miss really, really important cues that our body is giving us. Again, like if you're, I've had runs where, and I'm sure you've had runs that feel like crap, and then your heart rate is low. But then runs that feel like they're glorious, like the skies opened up and angels started singing, but then your heart rate was high. So it's like, wait, what? I don't really understand what's going on here. And I've also seen it's our Garmin's. If you have a Garmin, your Garmin works off of the 5 zones. But I know that there are other watch brands that work off of 6 zones or 7 zones. So it's like, how are we supposed to have a universal language for what zone 2 is when these things all measure it very, very differently? And I think the basic formula is 220 minus your age. And then from there, you do other calculations where zone 2 is supposed to be 60 to 70% of your heart rate. And I know for me, that would be that would that I would be walking. I would be walking most of my runs if I wanted to do that. And it's not to say that walking isn't beneficial, but it's to say that if I were to go off of that calculation alone, again, I don't think it would capture the full picture of who I am as an athlete. So when athletes come to you and they're asking you about zone 2, what are you telling them?
Well, my first question is, what are you using to track your heart rate? Like, hands down, that is the first question that I ask. I do think that using your heart rate as a metric during a run has its place. I think that if you are somebody who is constantly struggling with overuse injuries, if you are feeling beat up all the time after your runs, if you constantly are talking about how you're out of breath or you can't catch your breath or there's always stomach issues, like I think there is a place where maybe, like you were saying, we're so disconnected with our bodies just in general that we forgot what easy effort running feels like. And so I think for people in those scenarios, it can be really helpful. But the first conversation is, what are you using to check your heart rate? Because your wrist chest or your wrist heart rate monitor is not great. So many things can make it wrong. And so it can be interesting, but not accurate. I would put more credence into heart rate stuff for people who have a chest strap or the armband or some other varying metric, right, that is checking it. But even that, I like trusting your effort is more important then. But I think you do have to to learn what it feels like, which I think is hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, I try to explain it to people that your easy pace is your conversation pace. And by that, I mean, are you able to hold a conversation while you're running, or are you gasping for breath? Or are you, only able to get a few short words out versus a full sentence out? And I love when I tell people that, because they're like, I can't talk when I run. And I'm like, because you're probably running too fast. Like if you can't talk at all when you run, you're probably running too fast. And I know for people, even for myself, I tend to run solo, and I don't talk out loud to myself, but I do count my steps, right? And that's usually the one thing. I'm like a metronome where I'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I find that I'm able to do that, then I'm like, I'm good. But if I'm counting and then I'm like choking on my own breath, or I'm like heaving, then I know I'm running too fast. I also try to tell people, if you listen to music, then maybe it's the pace at which, and music is a tricky one too, because sometimes you listen to music and you start running faster. But I'm like, if you listen to music, it's the pace at which you can keep up with singing the songs of what you're listening to. So what tips or tricks do you give people when they're trying to figure out what is their zone two, quote unquote, zone two easy pace effort?
I tell them to sing. So the conversation one is the first one, but if they can't, then I say sing your favorite theme song to a TV show. So Friends is always my go-to example. Like, can you sing that while you're running? You don't have to like constantly sing it, right? Just like in a conversation, you wouldn't constantly be talking, but like it's a 30 seconds. Can you sing it, or are you dying? Because if you're dying, then you need to either slow down or take a walk break, which, people are like, I can't run any slower. It'll mess up my form. Something else to talk about, but also just take a walk break then, and then you can start running again when you can, get a sentence or two out. I also used to call my sister on runs, like on really long runs, when I would be like, what am I doing? This is a mess. I don't want to do this anymore. Am I running easy enough? I would just call her and make her talk to me for a couple of minutes.
You're like, let's call a friend while we're out on this run.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. And let me tell you, for those of you who have trouble catching up with people and like can't find the time, a long run is a really great time to do that. And there's nothing like talking to someone who's not running to put you in your place. Like I feel like anytime I've had that where I'll call my husband, or there's someone that I want to complain to about the run, they're like, then why are you doing it? I'm like, shut up. I don't need you to tell me why I'm doing it. I just need you to hold space for me to complain while I'm doing it. So, so I love that. The singing, conversation pace, calling someone. Now, as I shared earlier, when I first started running, there was no talk about zone two. It was just easy running, and it was run as fast as you can, right? Like I feel like there was no in between. It was, if you want to get faster, you have to run faster. I noticed that over the years, there has been more of a discussion of easy running. And I think our increased access to elite athletes has really highlighted the importance of easy running. But I find that even with easy running, I feel like people get really caught up in what is easy and my pace and the ego. I call it the ego of pace. And I can't run that easy because I need to run people really, really like their round numbers, right? Like I need to do that 10-minute pace, an 11-minute pace, 9-minute pace. And it's not necessarily beneficial for them. But can you, and we can both talk about it, just what are the benefits of that easy running for people?
So I won't even say most. I think that easy running, when it's truly easy effort, allows you to, like you were saying, run fast also, right? Whereas it used to be you just run fast to get faster. Like that was it. And I would go out and I would try and run every run a little bit faster than the run I had done before. Again, this is similar to you like 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And now we know that that's not the case because of science and access to information and a whole bunch of things. But I think that when I have runners who struggle with going slow enough on easy days, running easy enough on those easy days, then we have a conversation about how because they're not running their easy runs slow enough, they also aren't running their fast runs fast enough. So they're just constantly in a state of like fatigue in their body. Not high level fatigue. They're just constantly like mildly fatigued and inflamed. And when this happens over the course of like multiple training cycles, multiple years, you're never able to really put in the work to see the growth that you should have seen. Your mile time can come down minutes over the course of a couple of years. But if you're constantly just training in this mid range of never being really easy, you're not going to see that same growth that you may have otherwise seen in your times coming down, in your races coming down, in any of it, because you haven't given your body a chance to recover ever.
So what you're saying is that as runners, we need to be patient with the process. Is that what you're saying?
Imagine that. Imagine that.
I find that it seems, again, when I like to look at running as this long story, and it's for me, the story starts when I started running, because again, when I started running, it was you run everything fast, like fast, fast, fast. You gotta keep it fast. And I think what people fail to understand, and I experienced it, and maybe you have as well, that running fast all the time is one of the fastest ways to burn out, like physical burnout and mental burnout. Because I know I had times where I thought everything had to be fast, everything had to be fast. And running for me transformed into this chore of an activity that I had to do. And slowing down was really hard. I don't want people to think that this easy running and that it's easy, because it's actually not. Like I personally find that whenever I have to go for an easy run, those are actually harder runs for me, because I have to control myself more. I have to be more mindful and tuned into how I'm breathing and how I'm feeling and how are my legs moving and how is my body moving. And that took me a really, really, really long time to feel comfortable in my body, like comfortable enough to slow down in a way that running started to feel good. And it's not that it felt good while I was running, because again, my truth is that running does not always feel good. Sometimes it sucks, like it really sucks. But when I finished my runs, I wouldn't have that same sense of fatigue or that like, holy crap, what the hell did I do out there? It was more of like, all right, I feel very accomplished and I feel like I can do this again tomorrow. And that for me was my buy-in to this idea of easy running. And I loved it because again, at that point, the discussion was just run easy. And there were some people that would give actual numbers. So if you calculated, like if you ran a half marathon, and we still see it now. I saw it this morning too, right? Where whatever your mile time is, you can add like 3 minutes to that. And that supposedly is your easy pace. And while I appreciate things like that, I think it's very much so like the zone two things that it oversimplifies the process of running, particularly if you're sleep deprived or if you're extra stressed because of life or because of summer and hotter weather. Like that, I don't think it factors in the experience of being a human. But I feel like, again, for me, thinking about it, I'm like, everything has gotten so complicated. That's
Well,
just
and I
like,
think it's hard for people at the beginning because when you are a new runner and you do run everything fast, you're a new runner, you do get faster. Like it does happen. And I think that the fact that so many people start out that way, they think that it just like that's how it's supposed to be and that's how it continues. And then it leads to what you were saying with the burnout, right? Like you run a couple of half marathons or 5Ks, 10Ks, right? Those entry level quote unquote races, and you're getting faster every time and you're setting PRs and you're like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then you do things like sign up for your first marathon and you get so burnt out because it is really hard to train for a marathon if you're running everything faster or trying to, right? So I think that that's where the problem lies is that it works until it doesn't, and realizing it and recognizing it is hard.
especially when we're the waters of running are so pace based, right? Like your improvement, how you improve as a runner is by running faster. And to what you said, that's true to a point, right? Like I know for myself, when I first started running, within, I'd say the first 4 years of me running, all my times went down dramatically. I mean, big, big, big drops. And then afterwards, they haven't dropped. And I've been in a space of figuring out what needs to be tweaked for me, one. And then two, if I even care about that anymore, or if what I care about is more and I think that's where I'm at right now is what I care about more at the moment is staying injury free so that I can run all the distances I want regardless of time. Like that's really where my head is at the moment. But again, it's there is an ego check. I feel like there's always an ego check because when I first started running, everything was like, yeah, I did it. That 2 hour marathon, I did it. A 2 hour half marathon, not marathon. That is not me. But that 2 hour marathon was such a big thing. And then I wanted to push myself and see what more could I do. Or I even had the mistake, and I don't know if you've experienced this, of thinking that just because I ran that in a PR, that was my springboard for faster. So if I ran, and this happened to me after my marathon PR, that it was a sub 4 hour marathon. And after that race, I was like, now I've unlocked this distance, this pace in my body, and I have to run that going forward. And it was so, I mean, that, you know, no surprise to anybody, especially not to me. But the next marathon I ran was like it was a shit experience because of that. Because I thought, oh, if I did sub 4 paces in a marathon, that's what I should be able to do in training all the time. All the time. And then again, I get to this race and have the complete opposite experience of that, which was very, very humbling. And I had to, in my own way, slow down in order to give myself the grace to be who I was as a runner at that moment. And I'm still giving myself grace to be whoever I am as a runner at the moment. And I just find this zone two stuff, I guess, let me pull it back. When did you first start hearing zone two as a thing?
I feel like it's been around like in the underlings of the internet world. Like you can find heart rate training plans and like they exist and people kind of have talked about it. but I feel like it's pretty recent in terms of the popularity that it's gained for whatever reason. I have a girlfriend and I, and we joke that it's almost like you can see these waves of like a social media surge where so many run people, I don't even know what to call them because
I
they're
call them
not,
run-fluencers. Like,
yeah, but they're like almost like a wannabe coach because they're not always coaches. They just have a following and then they want to talk about it. I don't know. So this like surge of people talking about whatever. And a couple years ago, like everybody was talking about easy running. And then it changed from easy running. And now it's like this zone 2 running, and it should be zone 2 running, or like people who aren't directly in the run space, like a nutritionist or RD. Like, I get that they're trying to lower stress and things, but like there's nuances that are being missed when we talk about zone 2, and we stress athletes out about making sure that their heart rate is under 150.
yeah, I remember when I feel like the zone 2, well, I think for me it was easy running is where it started. This whole discussion on easy running. And then I'd say maybe 3 to 4 years ago, heart rate running really grew in popularity, really, really popular. And I'm like, what is this? Like, what are we talking about heart rate? And what are we like? Why are people obsessing over this? And yeah, there's a lot of research and literature that came out specific to running, but also in general as to aerobic fitness, regardless of how you get that aerobic fitness, that cardio in. But I started hearing a lot of heart rate training, heart rate training. The heart rate training started to get linked to the whole 80-20 rule, right? Where like 80% of your training should be quote unquote easy, 20% should be hard, which that's a whole other thing that I don't necessarily believe in either, because I'm like, 80-20 makes a lot of sense if you're running over 100 miles a week and you've got, like for some people it makes sense. And then for some people, it just doesn't make sense for what they're doing and when they're doing, which I will ask you about that. So I started hearing heart rate running, and I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this? I looked into it. I did the little calculation that 220 minus whatever my age was. And then I found the percentages and I saw those percentages and I thought, I'm never going to run again in my life, because in order for me to be at those heart rates, I'm going to be power walking everything. Like everything I'm going to power walk is not really helpful for me. I don't know about you, but for me, also on my long runs, my heart rate always elevates at the end. Like I can keep it nice and steady, but there's going to come a point where the sun comes out, where I am starting to feel fatigued, and my heart rate is just going to be like, okay, we're through the roof at this point. So for me, it was that easy running, then heart rate, and
Yes, for
then
sure.
and then I'd say probably the last like 1 to 2 years is where I started hearing more zone 2 stuff. Zone 2, and you're zone 2, and you've got to be in zone 2. And somewhere in the middle of that, this quote unquote rule of, okay, if you don't want to do the calculations, or you don't have access to a lab to get everything correctly measured, then you should just aim to be under 150. And I saw that and I thought, okay, let me give that a try. Let me kind of see if I can do that. For me personally, just don't like looking at my watch a lot. I don't like being on top of my watch as much. But also I noticed that if I tried to keep it under 150, like if I forced myself to stay under 150, my form actually started to break down, because I wasn't running in a way that was, I guess, natural to me, versus let me tune into the effort, and then let me pull myself back, versus let me like, I don't know. There was just, listen, I don't know what I was doing and whether I was following it right, but I have vivid recollection of this one run, and it was a 12-mile run. And I'm like, this is the run where I'm going to challenge myself to stay under that 150. I was so gung-ho. I'm like, I'm going to do it. Let me tell you, I had to walk so much. And again, there's nothing wrong with walking, but I had to walk so much that when I finished that run, my hip was hurting because of the start and stopping. Like I was just running in such a clunky way to try to keep my heart rate down. And not only that, I didn't have enough fuel on me because I didn't realize how much I would have to slow down in order to keep the heart rate at where it was. It was just awful. Like, and it was after that run that I'm like, never again am I going to look at my watch and hyper focus on the heart rate. Like, it's one thing to kind of glance down and just, okay, but that was a 12-mile run from hell because I was so focused on keeping it under 150 that, again, for me, I guess, long way to share that doesn't work for me because I'd rather tune into how I'm feeling. And that's usually the question that I ask myself is, am I feeling good? Am I feeling strong? Can I talk right now? Can I count out loud right now? Can I hear how I'm breathing? Am I breathing like I'm huffing, or am I able to take deep inhales and deep exhales? That's what's worked for me. But even then, we get into summer months and we can just throw all that in the air and be like, time to rediscover it. So, can you tell us a little bit about how summer affects this whole idea of heart rate training?
Well, when it's hot out and humid, it's the combo, right? So you have the dew point that goes when the dew point goes up, it's the temperature measure of heat and humidity. And when that happens, your heart rate is going to skyrocket. It's going to be so much higher than it was before. And there is nothing that you can do about it. It just is going to be what it is. And trying to run through heart rate, so many people start training, right, for big fall races, half marathons and marathons. And so the more that we focus on heart rate, the worse your runs are going to feel because you have this heart rate thing that is telling you that you're doing terrible when you're not actually doing terrible. It's just hot and humid. And like, yes, you will eventually acclimate. Like, it is what it is. Give yourself time to figure it out, but your heart rate is probably going to lag behind what it feels like to acclimate too. So getting in your head about it, I mean, the weather will do it. If you're a woman who is premenopausal, that time of the month is going to do it. Your heart rate is going to be higher. And the combination of those two things, the heat and humidity with the time of your cycle, is a whole other adventure that is going to make it exponentially higher for so different reasons. You are likely to be lower on sodium in that time of month too. So hydration becomes an issue, which again leads back to your heart rate being higher. So there's just like a perfect storm where we can't, if you're home with your kids for summer, right? That's a whole other stress of life that just is a fact, right? Your reliable, consistent schedule is now thrown off for 2.5 months, which stress is going to make your heart rate higher, mixed with the fact that it is hotter and humid. Like, there's just so many things that go into what makes your heart rate, and that could adjust it by 8 to 10 beats per minute on a run. And then to get so caught up in that, instead of like just going out and enjoying the fact that you're going for a run and that it's not a hard run and you get to just like run what feels good, like that should be the focus. I mean, really, for any work, any run, I think the focus should be, how is it feeling? For speed work, for runs, for races, like, what is the effort? Set the effort and just ignore the metrics and like go do the thing.
Yeah, and I think I feel like we're doing a disservice to runners in general when we hyper focus on one specific metric. And I think of, I guess, out of curiosity, when you're racing, what's your heart rate like?
I have no idea.
I think of, well, I know for myself, my heart rate is always extra elevated during a race. And it's because I'm really excited to be at a race, or I'm nervous, or I am didn't sleep well the night before because I'm excited about the race, which impacts it. Like I know for myself that if I were to focus on my heart rate during a race, I, one, I would worry so much about my performance during the race. And then two, I just wouldn't enjoy the experience because I would think that something was wrong with me. Why is my heart rate so high? Like, what's wrong with me? And there was actually, I wish I could remember where I saw it, but Nikki Hiltz. Oh my gosh.
Hilts.
Yes, thank you. Hiltz. I'm like, I can't remember if there's an L in there, but she, during one of the heats for the 1500 meter, they actually had the heart rate monitor on her. And her heart rate was like in the 190s. And I saw that and I'm like, wow, that is really high. But at the same time, like, this is your pro athlete in a racing situation. Like, I'm sure she's not going to finish that race and be like, oh my God, my heart, I almost died. She's not even thinking about her heart rate. She's thinking about how fast can I get to the finish line. And I saw that and I just thought it was so cool that they showed that because I'm like, all right, you see, all of us are stressing out, not all of us, but a good chunk of us are stressing out over heart rate. And here you have this pro athlete that probably doesn't care, right? Like, and in a racing environment, it's, again, for me, in a racing environment, my heart rate is always higher just because I'm so hyped up. I'm anxious. I mean, the line between anxiety and excitement is very, very thin. And again, for me, that if I were to focus on my heart rate, I wouldn't get the full experience of being in whatever run I'm in. So, what are other things that and you've kind of said it throughout, but just for clarity's sake, what are other things that people should be focusing on more than trying to fit? Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you. Okay, correction to what I said. Nikki Hiltz is non-binary and it is they. They go by they, them. Jen, you should have just corrected me, girl, and just said it. They, them. That's it.
You're on a roll. I didn't want to.
No, correct me, correct me. Well, it is they, them. So my apologies to Nikki and to everyone listening. But yeah, I was going off on heart rate and my brain talk about
I
how
know.
everything just, you don't even realize it. Like the use of pronouns is so ingrained that don't even realize when we're using them and using them incorrectly. So thank you. Next time, girl, just call me out and tell me, it's they, them. So, so to go back to my question of what should people be focusing on instead? Again, you've kind of mentioned it throughout, but for those people who are really, really, really caught up in this idea of zone 2 and being in zone 2, what are some other things that they can focus on instead of being so regimented with trying to fall within that zone?
I think that's like effort, right? So you want to focus on your effort. And I know that the rate of perceived effort scale, like the 1 to 10 and staying at a 5 or whatever, like that is hard for people. And I totally can appreciate that. I think that especially as somebody who I love numbers, like there is nothing more than I love than to like look at splits from races and compare to elevation and compare to heart. Like I love to look at all of this stuff. But also the way you feel is the most important metric of any of it. And so I think doing the things that you can do to get you more connected with how you are feeling in your body. So maybe that means running naked. Don't wear your watch on a run. I know that that's like mind blowing, but like that is an option. You are allowed to wear nothing on your, like just your clothes, obviously. You are allowed to go without turning on Strava, without using your watch. Like you are allowed to just go run and do what feels good in your body. I think running with friends can be helpful because you are chatting with them. Paying attention to what you are listening to. I cannot listen to music on most of my easy runs because I will go too fast. So on most of my easy effort runs, I am listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook. It makes me slow down. I think that those are two really important things that help you stay connected to your body. I think the other thing is I really like throwing in, and I'll do this to some of my athletes during base building, like a check, like a posture check. So it's actually part of their workout where every 5 minutes they have 30 seconds, and we call it a posture check, but really it's a like get your life together check. And it's like, yes, you're paying attention to your posture, but also paying attention to your mind. Like, are you letting your mind go to the dark places where you're like angry at yourself and mad and hating life? Like, okay, well, why is that? Like, check in with your body. Just give your body 30 seconds to like stop paying attention to the world and start focusing inward. And then after that, after 30 seconds, like go about your day and go back to your run and whatever. And then 5 minutes later, like, a couple of times over the course of a 30-minute run, do that. And then the other thing that I do is most of my athletes have weekday runs that are by time and not miles. Because I think when you set the goal to be a certain amount of time on feet, it helps with that ego check, right? You're not trying to run 3 miles in 30 minutes because you have stuff to do afterwards. You're going to go run for 30 minutes. And I don't care if you're going to get 2 miles in, or if you get 3 miles in, or if you get 3.5 miles in. And nobody should be getting more than about 3.5 miles in 30 minutes on an easy run. Otherwise, you probably should go talk to somebody about being sponsored. Like, it's just not like your easy run should not be a 7-minute mile for most of the recreational runners. It's just not, that's not where what you should be doing. It means you're probably running too fast. So I think that just setting the goal to a different place is really important, right? Setting the goal for a time instead of a distance helps make that mental shift. Like today, I went for a 30-minute run and I ran 2.74 miles. My type A brain has now made the shift that, like, that's okay. I don't have to hit 275. I don't have to hit 3. Like, my goal was a 30-minute run and I did a 30-minute run and I can be done because I did what I was supposed to do. I did what my coach put on my training calendar for today. And that is the win. I don't need to make it an even mile thing. Like, I don't need to worry that it was an 11 something minute mile. Like, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, and I find that if you have a coach, it's a little bit easier, right? Where I know I'm the same way. I love to give people time-based runs because I'm like, I don't want you to think about distance. I just want you to go out and just run and have fun. And I find that when people have time-based runs, and I don't know if you've noticed this with the people you work with, but I feel like when I give people time-based runs, they're more likely to do a harder route than like the easy route. Like I feel like with time-based runs, people push themselves in very different ways that help them grow as athletes versus the distance-based run that it's just a little more rigid for some people. And yeah, let me tell you, I remember when I first started running that people would post, and I haven't seen a reel like this in a really long time, but the people who are like, my run was 2.98. So I walked circles in my driveway to get to the 3. And like I would see that. And I used to be that runner too. Don't get me wrong, where I was like, I need the even numbers. Like it's got to be a round number. And now I don't really care about that because it's the purpose of the run is not the distance so much as it is about the time on feet or the effort of what I'm doing on that run. So it's not distances. Is this an easy effort? And I love that you keep saying that because I think that's a takeaway for people. Focus less on, not focus less, but transition or reframe it as not zone 2 and not an easy run, but as an easy effort run. Because I think even when you put in that idea of effort, you're encouraging people to be flexible with what that is every day. So my effort today might be very different from my effort tomorrow, but those are both easy as a range. I guess it's that inclusion of the word effort makes it okay for it to be a range. But for the people who are self-training or who are new to this, what words of encouragement would you have for them?
I think to just remember that it does take time. That if you are somebody who has been constantly pushing faster, or you're not sure if you're doing easy enough running, like all of those things, I think that it takes time to feel how it feels in your body. I think that's where like some kind of reflection during your run is really helpful. Like if you, my watch will now prompt me to like rate whether it was easy or not. But just there's so many training journals out there. Like have some thing that you can do where it's quick, but it's a reflection where you're noticing it, right? You're noticing, how did that run feel in my body? Not like, did I achieve did I do 3 miles? Yep, check the box. Like, great, that's great. But also, how did it feel to run those 3 miles? And I think that over the course of a training cycle, if you start becoming more in touch with how it felt on your run, how you feel when it's over, then that's going to be a better judge of where you're supposed to go going forward, right? What level training plan should you use next time? What do you need to do to get faster? What are your goals? What are they? Are they time based? Are they process based? Are they mileage based? Right? Like you can use that information, and it is data. It's just more qualitative than quantitative. Like using the how you feel data to drive decisions, because ultimately that's why we run, is because we want the feeling. None of us are getting, I'm assuming most of us listening to this are not getting paid for this sport. And so like to be the athlete in it. So like what's driving you and how do you want to feel, and then using that to inform your decisions, rather than, well, a year and a half ago I ran a 1:47 half marathon, so I think now I should train to run a 1:45. Like, where are you getting that from? What have you been doing in the last year and a half? Like, how, we need to come back and like figure out some stuff, because just because you ran one race with one time a while ago doesn't mean that that's the jumping off block for your next training cycle. And that the paces you're running were the race paces that, like, there's just a lot more to it. So basing it all on your effort and how things are feeling is a much better choice, even if it's going to take time to figure it out. Like, choose to settle in for the long haul and like be here and enjoy the process, and it will come.
I want to highlight something that you said, because I think it's really important in this whole zone to easy running discussion, that sometimes the information gathering of the zone two, the easy running, doesn't happen while you're on the run. So you said when it's over. How do you feel when it's over? And that's something you mentioned, I think, at the top of this conversation in terms of recovery, right? Like if you're truly running at an easy effort, the recovery is faster. Would you say it would be a faster recovery?
Yeah, it's significantly faster on your body because you didn't really do anything to tax it. So
Yeah.
it's just a way to build your aerobic system so that you can go out and do the hard workout the next day or the day after that, right? And long runs aside, like you mentioned before, that things happen on a long run that are different, right? Long runs are taxing in and of themselves, but those weekday runs or the weekend runs that are like your 40-minute easy run, your hour easy run, like those you should not get done with those and feel like you're exhausted, that you need a nap, that you're done for the day, that you're just like totally tapped out. Like you should finish those and be like, oh, let's go day. Like, what's next?
So I laugh internally and I'm trying to hold it back now because I'm like, I wish someone had this conversation with me when I first started running, because I know I definitely had a lot of runs where I would push it really, really hard. I mean, I've had so many runs like that. And then I feel totally drained from the day. And then I would get upset with myself because I couldn't turn it around fast enough, or because my speed workouts that were supposed to be speed workouts suffered greatly. Like I just couldn't hang, or my legs were so incredibly heavy that I couldn't. I felt like I never fully warmed up for the run because of that. And I think, again, this question of how do you feel when it's over is a great reminder for all of us that the easy effort continues beyond that run, and that easy effort actually sets the stage for the runs to come. Like that's what I'm hearing from you of okay, if I'm taking that 40-minute run and it is an easy effort, then I'm going to be able to recover enough to turn over to the next run that might be a 60-minute or maybe a 30-minute easy effort run. And I find that, again, for me, that's where I'm at with running, where I'm like, what do I need to do in order to do this for a long time? Like how do I need to run, and how do I need to take care of myself off the run in order for me to continue running at the capacity that I would like to run? So that's the question I constantly ask myself. And when I ask myself that question, it makes it a lot easier for me to slow down, quote unquote, slow down, because I am looking at what does my body need today to set myself up for tomorrow, to then set myself up for next week, next month, next year, the next 20 years, however long I'm able to run. So what should we do whenever we see a post that's like zone 2, or when we see the Instagram influencer touting the benefits of zone 2? How should we respond to that? Or, is it just as simple as keep on scrolling, or don't follow, or check the sources? I don't know. What do you say?
I mean, I think it's a lot of just scroll past it, because there's so many things that will come up. Like this is not going to be the last thing that like I disagree with, right? Like it just isn't. It's not going to be the last thing that I think that they're like, it's not the first thing that I have disagreed with that has gotten a lot of like internet, social media attention. And so I think that just knowing where to focus your attention and where to ignore it is super important. I think that if you are curious about something, whether it is zone 2 running or something else, that it is super important to research it and to know where the research, quote unquote, is coming from. And it's not just a Google search of zone 2 and seeing that Runner's World has an article on it. Like that's cool and it's a great place to start, but like look at the actual scientific studies being cited in that. And then, like I said, like there is a time and a place where I think it can be helpful to people, but I don't think it's all runners all the time. I don't think everybody should be doing heart-based training, especially without the education and the tools behind it. So like, yes, like with most things in running, it depends. Like there is probably a time and a place for most of these things that we have seen like take rise and fall in social media popularity, run influencer popularity. But I think that knowing what is the one that you're going to follow and then why you're following it is super important. Letting all the things impact you and taking them all in leads to the people who I get that come to me and go, I don't know what to do because I've been told so many things. And we have to have a lot of really serious conversations about, well, if you're going to work with me, you have to trust my philosophy that is based in science. Like I coach the way I coach for a reason, not just because it worked for me one time and now I think it's going to work for you. Like this is why I coach the way I coach. And if you're going to sign up with me, like I need you to trust me. You can't trust me and then also try and do these 17 other things because you saw them on Instagram.
Yeah, listen, y'all, if you see it on Instagram, it's great that it's out there, but I feel like I see this all the time where I'm like, whatever you see on Instagram, take it with a grain of salt. Like put that little asterisk of that's what works for that person. And I don't know if it's going to work for me. And maybe I don't even care if it'll work for me. But I think there's from what I'm hearing you say, I just want to remind people that running, I don't want to simplify running, but I want to remind people that running is simple, right? Like we don't have to go and change things and switch it up and complicate them. And to the people who are new runners, my words to you are like, don't even worry about heart rate. Like, don't worry about it at all. Like, it's already, everything about running is already new to you. Don't worry about that. Instead, like Jen has said, focus on time on feet. Focus on can you get yourself to running 10 minutes? Can you get yourself to those 15 minutes? Can you get yourself to those 20 minutes? I just find that when you're new to running, my opinion, and maybe this is a hot take, like none of this should matter. Your pace shouldn't matter. Your heart rate shouldn't matter. Distance shouldn't matter. None of that should matter. What should matter is you believing in your ability to do the thing, or you gaining confidence in your ability to maybe do the thing for a little bit longer. And then everything else can kind of fall into place. And then even for people who are more seasoned runners who are thinking, oh, is heart rate running for me? I feel like it's always a good thing to be curious, because I do believe that training the same always will not lead to new and different results. But I also think that it has to make sense with who you are as a runner and your goals as a runner. And in that case, I feel like the question that a person can come back to is, and I guess that question is how do I feel? And then how do I want to feel? And I find that in my case, or just in the people that I've worked with, that in general, if they feel really good or really strong, then everything else kind of falls into place. Assuming, like on race day, I feel like race day it has to be the perfect storm of everything coming together: your mind, your body, the weather, the course. Like there's so much that needs to come together. But I find that this whole idea of zone 2 is complicating something that doesn't need to be complicated. And that, in my opinion, is just creating another gateway that can prevent people from thinking the sport is even for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. This was a great conversation, as always. I feel like anytime I talk to you, it's always a great conversation. 3 final questions ish, maybe 3, maybe 2. But the first question is, can you remind us of where we can find you, where we can connect more with you, and just, are you taking on new run coaching clients? Like, just give us the full scope of where you're at and what you're offering right now.
I am Misadventures of a Marathoner on all the things. That is website, Instagram, email, literally everything. I have maybe one spot for one-to-one open right now, and my group coaching just closed, so that is all that is there. Yeah, it's been a super fun spring.
Yeah, listen, you've put a lot into yourself, so it makes me happy to hear that you only have one, because I'm like, okay, she's going to kind of put it out to other people, but hopefully
Yes.
continue taking care of yourself. What do you have coming up that's exciting that we can cheer you on in?
I am super excited, like I said at the beginning, to just like more chill this summer. And then we get to meet in person in November. And that is my next big running thing, is the Every Woman's Marathon. And I have not decided to what extent I will be running it. I got a bib because I was having FOMO and I wanted to be there. I feel like it's going to be a super fun event. I have a number of athletes, I think 6 athletes that are going to run it. And so I'm super excited just for that weekend. And then Steffi and I and a couple other friends get to meet in real life. So I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, it definitely makes I feel like from here till November, it's going to be a blur. I feel like I'm not even going to know what's going on. It's a roller coaster. All right.
I mean,
Final
you have a lot more
question.
going on there, so.
Yeah, I listen, no one tells you that adulthood is very busy for reasons beyond just being an adult. It's just busy. All right. The final question I have for you are just what are your final words for us?
That running is supposed to be fun. Like, if you don't find some joy in it, not always type 1 fun, not always laughing and giggling kind of fun, but it is supposed to be fun in some way, shape, or form. And if you are not having fun with it, there are plenty of other things that you can do to like get cardio in. And so have fun with it. Like, ignore all the noise at the end of the day and just have fun, because that's what it's supposed to be. Like, there's the reel that goes around every once in a while. I've heard the audio like 3 times now circulate about how like less than 2% of people will ever sprint after the age of 8 or something like that. And like, it just makes me want to go for a run every time I see it. Like, no, I am an adult and I will go sprint, and like that's fun. And so I think just remembering the parts of this that are fun and like letting the noise kind of go away. And when you get stuck in those moments of feeling like it's just heavy and like a lot and you don't know what you're supposed to do, just remember that it's supposed to be fun to go for a run.
Yeah. And just want to piggyback on that, that if you do find that you're overthinking your runs because of things like zone 2 or your pace or any of that, just challenge yourself to let it go, right? Whether it's running naked or whether maybe you just need a couple of more days off and recovery to miss running. I know that that happens to me sometimes where I need to miss running, or I need to remember that I enjoy it to come back to it. So, Jen, thank you so much for joining me. Another great conversation, and for just expanding on your Instagram post with everything you shared here. And I hope that the people who have listened are going to go on their next run and really, really run for joy for themselves and in honor of this conversation too. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.